that you've had, you want to relay and try and understand what that experience was about, please do so. And even those who, as I've said, don't have a spiritual experience and they're struggling, we want to most importantly hear from you as well, because we want to ensure that before you leave, you also get the opportunity to see and taste or have this spiritual experience. We want to work towards that. So let's see who wants to ask anything first or give any, relay any experience. Please put your hand up and I'll bring the mic over, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum. Right.
Okay. Try now.
Assalamu alaikum. That's much better. Right, so my question is, I'm struggling to understand the difference between imagination and experiencing something. So today's muraqabah, when we started after the cleansing, I was trying to imagine Hazrat Sahib coming down, meeting them here, and then going from here. So when that started, I was here, I could see them, and then I drifted off, I was just wandering off, and then I was just elsewhere. So I just went with the flow. I didn't picture anything, I just went with the flow. After that, I started picturing myself around the Hanakaba with Hazrat Sahib and everyone here. It was like flashes, and we were all doing the Durood Majlis Zikr from last night. And then I drifted off again, so it's back and forward. At the time I felt this is imagination, but when we come back around and I open my eyes, it was different. It felt like it was real and I was there. So in the Tasbih Namaz, something similar, but this time my eyes are opened, and when we're reading and going down into Sajda, it was as if we were outside Masjid Al-Aqsa. And then the Hanakaba as well, but again the flashes. So I'm just struggling to understand the difference and how to know whether this is an experience or not.
Bismillah wa ala Rasulillah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So inshallah, as you've mentioned, the difference between imagination and a spiritual experience, as is mentioned, is that when things begin to happen out of your control. So for example, someone says, imagine the Kaaba. Now, when imagining the Kaaba, or when you went to Masjid Al-Aqsa, maybe there were details or aspects, or even you didn't even intend to go to Masjid Al-Aqsa, but you appeared there. So this is an indication that there's spiritual experience. So when something happens out of your control. Now, many people get unfortunately mixed up, and it ruins the experience, because during the experience they're still trying to interpret, is this imagination, is this spiritual, is this imagination, etc. But rather, a person should just go with the flow. So the way imagination works is, it's a faculty, just like sight is a faculty. Like we can use physical vision and we can see with our eyes. Similarly, imagination is a faculty, meaning it's a scaleless aspect of the human being. And in the spiritual travel, just like in dreams, that the imagination is still also used. So when the person has a dream, imagination is also used. It's because it's like the receiver in the brain. It's a part of the brain, and it creates imagery without your eyes being open. So you should see that it's not that his imagination is coming from imagination. That is the role of the Shaykh, that is the role of the Ustaz, to interpret where that signal is coming from. But imagination is the faculty in which you receive the image. Does that make sense? So you should think as imagination as the screen. The mind is as the screen. So if you're trying to interpret yourself while experiencing, then yes, the experience will be very choppy and back and forth. But this is a self-created difficulty. Actually, when a person lets go, and as I mentioned, goes with the flow, then the experience becomes far more easier and clearer and becomes more experiential, as opposed to what you're experiencing, which is the choppiness in the travel. So another aspect of the imagination people overlook is when a person is for the big introduction to this methodology, that the imagination is used to direct. So meaning, imagine a Kaaba, imagine Medina, travel here. So that is within your conscious control. But that's like when you ride a bike, you have stabilizers. So the stabilizers are there to keep you riding straight. But eventually they will go, and you won't be able to tell that they've gone. And now this is where spiritual experience takes over. So the purpose of these practice sessions is to help with that beginning part, which is the stabilization. And as you practice, then the stabilizations will go, and it will be spiritual experience. So as you've mentioned, these were spiritual experiences that you were in. As you mentioned, that you're doing the dhikr majlis and in Bayt al-Muqaddis and these different stations that you've attended. So this is really what the reality of the matter is. And as the Prophet ﷺ said, they said, ihsan is to worship Allah as though you see them. Meaning that you don't see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but as though. What does as though mean? To use the faculty and ability of imagination. This is what spirituality is. This is where it starts, imagination. We have the false expectations that, that I'm going to see in 2020 vision, or I'm going to see visually like this. This isn't the wrong expectation. That the spiritual travel is more like, as it's mentioned, there's 20 degrees to spiritual travel, and one of which is like a dream state. So as a blessed teacher mentioned earlier today, that is like a vague or almost like a dream type state. That person is neither sleeping but is close to sleep. So as you practice, this becomes easier and clearer. And one of the things that we should also be very careful of is when we come into these majalis, when we come into the salah, the reason why the Brother Zafar is mentioning people to come early is because, as our blessed teacher mentioned, that there's two ends of the scale. There's one side of the scale is when you're fully awake and all of your senses are there. The other side of the scale is you're unconscious, like death. So what you want to achieve is in the middle. The middle is you are shutting down your physical senses, so the inner senses awaken. So to do this, the preparation period is key, because this is the time where a person clears his mind, clears his heart, focuses on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In fact, this should happen from the moment that you walk into the masjid. We walk into the masjid with Allahumma aftah li abwaba rahmatik. Oh Allah, open the gates of mercy, meaning the gates of mercy that I'm going to travel through, etc. So as the blessed teachers mentioned, that consciousness shouldn't start with sitting in the floor on the muraqabah. Consciousness should start from the minute you walk into the masjid. That you should be cognizant, Allah is watching me, Allah is hearing me, Allah is with me. The faculty of speech and connecting to makhluk should end. That's the time to now focus purely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's like when a plane is taking off, first the pilot has to check that the engines are working, and then what heats up the engine. There's at least 15-20 minute period before you take off. So it's like this, that before you're taking off, the preparation is key. And this doesn't necessarily start with even the masjid, even the wudu. Wudu is what? Wudu is preparation for salah. So even there, if a person is becoming more cognizant and focusing on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a preparation, that they're meeting Allah, then as they come in, so those 15 minutes before the muraqabahs are key. People don't realize that. They say, how do I get better experience? How do I get clarity? How do I get... Well, it's the preparation. They mention that every act of worship has a door, and the door to salah is wudu. So in this case, similarly, in these muraqabahs, use the opportunity for the preparation to really clear the mind, the heart, and then when inshallah next time you sit, it'll become easier and clearer. So inshallah, so that This is the matter. So to summarize, it's not for the seekers to interpret or self-interpret what is imagination, what is spiritual, because the danger with that is what you might think is spiritual might be imagination, and what you think is imagination might be spiritual. So you could misdiagnose things very easily. So this is left to the faculty of the trainers, the ustads, and Hazrat Saab, the Shaykh. So your role is just to enjoy and experience, not to, is this imagination, is this not? If that is happening, then alhamdulillah, it doesn't matter the source. The source is the responsibility of the Shaykh and the ustads to validate or not validate. Does that make sense?
Okay, anybody else? Rather than me choosing someone, put your hand up. And I would most like to hear from people who have not spoken before as well.
Assalamu alaikum, Ustad. Just a quick, when doing today's session, it felt different to previous sessions, and I think that may have been because of the length of time we were spending preparing, but I felt concentration wasn't as focused, and I didn't feel like I managed to travel. Is this just something that you accept with the experiences, that they may fluctuate, or is this to do with, as you were saying, being prepared and making sure you're fully awake and so on?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dr. Nasser, you were saying today's session, you obviously 12:30, you carried on the Lataif. How was the process? Just explain, describe, because I appreciate what you're saying, but it's a human nature, a tendency to we always have a reference point and compare against the reference point. And while Ustad Harun is saying that we really want to unpick that and say, look, make the job easy for myself. What do I have to analyze? Like you said, you've been to the medical school and training, and you know for a fact to become a best of trainers and doctors is that sometimes initially you just have to imitate, and just to get the skills. Sometimes you know it doesn't make sense to you. And at one point maybe you can suggest different ideas as well. But I think at this stage is better that rather than using our normal conscious mind, especially your analytical mind that you are trained of, you're always like comparing a referencing point. But I think you can transfer. Sorry, Brother Hamid. Sorry, you can transfer that analytical skill onto the ustad. Let them do that. I don't know if that makes sense. In the sense that I'm just going to try my best. If I struggle or I see a white color or black color or completely become blunt, that's fine. But even then, we just relate it as it comes along, and let them then explain. There may be many factors and reasons. So on that basis, could you just maybe say how was the Lataif when you did so and transfer?
Yeah. So when I was in the process of cleansing the Lataif, and each time we were given a color to do. So I was imagining and working through it, but then would find myself suddenly I've drifted off, not necessarily thinking of anything, but I was just somewhere else. And then
do you remember where that somewhere else is? Is it random or somewhere that you know in your life or reference point, things like that?
No, so it wasn't like I was thinking about something, or it was almost.
It would be interesting to know what that is. Do you remember? Or drifted off to?
I think it was almost as if I'd fallen asleep, okay. Like nothing, and then.
So let me just ask you. So when you fall asleep and when you regain consciousness, what were your pros thinking? Did you feel like completely lost what's going on, or you feel as though I'm continuing the Lataif? For example, let's say you did the orange and you drifted out while you dozed off. For example, as soon as you regain the consciousness, were you naturally thought that I'm being green now, or the ustad is saying let's do light blue? Or is it like you have to recall your thought, oh, what's happened here? Like really,
yes.
You just woke up as though, okay, I'm trying to find out, where am I, and what's happening here?
So,
which one was it?
Back in I'm in the Lataif process, and I just, whatever the last colour was, just started doing that until Brother...
So you were not lost in that process?
No.
Okay. These are significant, man. You might not be to yourselves, but for to the people who are trained or learning, it is quite significant as well. So we mentioned inshallah.
I think it felt like it was on the yellow and the blue lataifs that I.
There's a film between, so you missed that from yellow and you gain consciousness on blue.
No, so when it was the yellow one, I felt like I drifted off. So when we were doing the red, I managed to stay with it. Orange, stay with it. Yellow, and I felt that was when I drifted off and I came back, oh yes, I'm on yellow. And then green, and then blue, and then blue I drifted off. And then dark blue, and so on. Make sense?
Okay, that's fine. Inshallah, please do continue, yeah.
So, and then went through that process, and then when it came to transferring and doing the golden breath, did that, and then tried to meet the teacher, and then I think, so because there was a direction where to go, I was just trying to think, okay, so what will I imagine, or what should I start with, and just walking with the teacher, and that was it.
So alhamdulillah, that's why it's important, because it's part of learning experience. Like yourselves know, that no one type of learning is the same. If it is, then it becomes very boring as well, and you'll switch off for permanent, as you know. So brothers will also teach, that it's always a different type of learning, different experience how you learn, and different way it actually sticks to your mind and in terms of learning as well. So part of that is it's not necessarily we have to analyze, oh, it went well, it didn't go well. In my, I would say in my suggestion that it wasn't well or not well. What's happened is that, yes, sometimes you feel tired, you can doze off. So one thing, because you didn't have rest. But in your case, you said you were prepared well, you were on time and so on. So there's also another explanation or another reason when you doze off and you come back and you feel as though you're continuing your practices, whatever you're doing. That's not actually sleep or becoming absent. Is what the suggest is what our teachers have mentioned, Hazrat Sahab, is that sometimes your journey starts that your body actually shut down. So your ruhani, your spiritual journey is actually happening stealthily. You know what we say normally, oh, your body is shutting down, or latte shutting down. At that moment, it's normally at the level of imagination at best. Because, I can still feel my body. So am I fooling myself saying that your body's disappeared, my latte disappeared? That could be a question of your mind as well. But it happens. Obviously, it begins with imagination and thought. But in those temporary moments, it actually happened to you that you completely become absent from your body. Because the focus of the practice of the Latifa and how the Ruh and your inner was engaged in that, and in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you completely switched off to the point where we become unconscious of it temporarily. So in fact, it's actually better. And the signs are two. Number one is, how do I know then, or how do the brothers know that it is actually I've dozed off? It's not any kind of a spiritual journey happened stealthily. That's why I asked you a question. Had you felt lost, I know what's happening, and as though woken up from sleep, those feelings like constricted, you feel as though a sense of loss, that's a sign that you actually fallen asleep. Whereas if, for example, I'm doing muraqabah and remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name like we were doing, and then suddenly you just don't know what's happening, and then suddenly again you regain consciousness, but you still as though the remembrance of Allah is there, whatever practice is doing the muraqabah, the practices with your mind, that's still there. But rather, it's a pleasant feeling as well. You don't feel lost or constricted. It's pleasant feeling, and I wish I stayed longer. Those kind of some of the indications. Then that's a strong indicator, a sign that you're actually journeying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but purely without your senses being conscious in that sense. So alhamdulillah, this is good that we really want to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the point where we want to minimize the distraction, to the point where my body is a distraction now in remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it's the feeding of the spirit, not the body itself. Remember the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So alhamdulillah, that's happened. And obviously, like we mentioned yesterday, different colors has different significance in terms of our life and the actions that we do, directly as well. They're like I said, reflectors that actually reflects upon what actions we are doing or not. And inshallah, slowly we'll go through that. You'll understand better, inshallah. But like yourself said, that after you had transferred, and here's another, you could say, it's actually purpose-built teaching that normally guides, so you cannot rely on that. But here you've learned to an extent now. Now, whatever we've been advised, whatever we've been trained to an extent thus far, we utilize that now. So basically, you are trained now what do? We say normally, find the teacher. And then let the teacher take you to the journey. So that hidden reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to guide as the person who's going to take you, you're now learning that as an experience. Whereas if you was led, then what would have been, we could have been passive. This is, so that's another part of learning where sometimes our teacher and instructors, they purposely don't do a guided session so that we are learning now. We know what to do, we just have to push ourselves what to do, inshallah. So yeah, Jazakallah for your experience, sharing that.
I'm going to pick somebody who's not spoken before now. Your name and where you're from?
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Zafir. I'm from Oldham. My experience here, I've not really experienced anything. I keep trying, but it just seems to be blank. And with my consciousness, I feel fully conscious. I don't feel like as though I'm drifting or anything. The only thing I have experienced is I've seen like a white light in the sky, and as it zooms out, it's like a galaxy, but then it's just blank again. It seemed to be going in and out of light and black, light and black.
Right, mashallah. In actual fact, you see, there are so many factors which are at work. Let's say a small hair gets in our eyes, and this our eye cannot see. And the spiritual vision which happens through, like some brothers and others, is the fadl of Allah or the power. Otherwise, the veils of darkness and things which we have are so many that actually until they are not purified, a person would not. But these sessions are not for tasting, you may say, not the actual that you're expected to have, because you've not been prepared for that. So it is expectation. So we say that everyone can have experience. It's what they label sometimes is wrong. Let's say you yourself mentioned you saw galaxical or some light and it zoomed. Obviously that's an experience as well. And everyone can experience at thought level, maybe not imagination. Imagination also is in within one's choice, but especially thought level, everyone has. So what we ask you to do, and the people that they just actually follow the process comfortably, not focusing too much and like actually trying to create something by force, anything, just simply moderately, and then that results in actually one's clarity, one's experience and things. So ye hai. So inshallah there's nothing to worry. So you have also seen, as they say, light end of tunnel. So maybe that session which brothers will do with you, especially the new people and others, that part is completely yet, you may say, not known. All this which is on the here wall, you see, this is something which you are just taught to taste, and so that when the right time comes, you can also, alhamdulillah, do things like spiritual prayers and muraqabah. This is a foundation type actually matter. So inshallah, there's no you may say hopelessness in relation to Allah Jalla Majduhu, but it's just a matter of one's seriousness, one's sincerity, and inshallah that person, Allah Azza wa Jal Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, as we are going to mention, have created us for Him. So that is where we fit in most appropriately. Jazakallah. ठीक है ना इंशाल्लाह.
Inshallah, we will continue with these sessions later on when we will be given the opportunity again. Now I have great pleasure in going into our main presentation for the afternoon, led by our teacher Shaykh Ahmad Dabbagh. And these are less life-changing lessons, so do pay attention and listen with great anticipation that you will be learning some life-changing skills, inshallah.